Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Found His Soulmate in Ayame Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Now, the original plan was to pair up teams so each member's talents would contribute to the fullest extent of the team they were on, explained Shikaku, yawning. This way, each team would be balanced into special teams. Some examples like a tracking team, CIA team, and powerhouse team. However, this year, we're going to try something different. What do you mean, Shikaku-sensei? Asked Naruto. Shikaku groaned. I'm not going to get used to being called that. How troublesome. What I mean is your entire class will be divided into 6 categories, then each student will be paired on a team with each student having a different ability. 6 categories? Asked Ino with raised eyebrows. Tracking, assassination, attack, capture, medical and interrogation. Each genin in your class has at least 1, if not 2, of these qualities. This way, each team will be an even match for any mission we are given by the Hokage. We'll also be able to take more missions. What kind of team are we, sensei? Shino asked. We're pretty much a combination of all, but our labeled group is TIAT, tracking, interrogation, and attack. Shikaku turned to Ino. With your family's jutsu, you'll be able to see into our prisoner's mind and pull any information we're looking for. But I know how tiring that is, so we'll arrange you to have some torturing techniques as well. I know that might be difficult for you, but it's a necessary asset to a ninja. That won't be a problem, said Naruto. All Ino has to do is complain to the prisoner about her precious Sasuke and the guy would crack like a walnut. Ino's eyes went white with rage and growled. Shikaku and Naruto laughed while Shino quietly chuckled. Good idea, said Shikaku. But Ino, I looked at your records and found out you probably have the best chakra control of the team. If you want, I'll arrange you take healing jutsus at the hospital. Then, if any of our party members are injured, we won't have to retreat from our missions. Ino nodded, but didn't say anything. Actually, she looked a little disappointed at the thought of doing more training. Shikaku turned to Shino. With you Kikaichu insects, you'll be our tracker. Your father explained to me how your insects work, so we'll be relying on you to find our enemies or destinations. Also, your father explained that if you train hard enough, you can also become an assassination shinobi as well. He shared with me what you need to work on and I'll help you as best as I can at controlling you insects and chakra. Shino nodded. To be honest, he was looking forward to his training with his new sensei. Finally, Shikaku turned to Naruto. Naruto, with the new jutsu you learned last week, you'll be our attack force. Your massive chakra reserves and shadow clones will be our key to a wide range of frontal attacks and if the need calls for it, covering our escapes. My son told me he taught you the basic chakra control exercises, so all you need to learn is more jutsus. Ones that are not taught at the academy. Naruto nodded, excited at the thought of learning more jutsus. However, you really need to work on your stealth. You have a lot of stamina, but you can be impatient and restless. I've read the reports from several chunin about your missions throughout the years in the village, so you need to work on keeping quiet and waiting for the right time to strike. We'll work on that. Naruto nodded again. He felt himself swell with pride about his pranks, but then lower at the comment about his stealth. Though he knew it was true. So when will we begin our missions, sensei? Shino asked. Hold on, let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, let's introduce ourselves. What? Asked Ino. We're a team now. We should know a little about each other. You dreams, ambitions, fears, dislikes, and goals. Stuff like that. Be sure to tell me you all the jutsu you know as well, Shikaku said happily. Can you give us an example? Sure. My name is Shikaku Nara. I'm a jonin for the village of the Hidden Leaf. My hobbies are cloud watching, playing shogi with my son, and hanging out with my friends, Shuza and Inoichi, at the bar. My dislikes are cloudless days and my wife nagging at me to help out around the house on my days off. My goal is to teach you three the most I can, pass leadership of my clan to my son, and spend my retirement watching the sky. Like that, okay, nodded Ino. Why don't you go next? Shikaku suggested. Me. Well, my name is Ino Yamanaka. My hobbies are picking flowers, helping my family at their shop, and, she trailed of before blushing. Chasing Sasuke finished all three males. My dreams are, she trailed off again, giggling. Sasuke is my boyfriend finished all three males. My dislikes are forehead and perverts. She shouted. Okay. And your jutsu abilities. Now Ino looked a little sheepish. Well, I know all the jutsu and taijutsu they taught us at the academy. And, I know my father's mind-body switch jutsu. But, that's about all I know. Shikaku sighed. Ino, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You're from a very prestigious clan, you should know more jutsu than that. Your father told me that he's tried to teach you the clan's fighting style along with several of his jutsus. But he said you had other plans and from you little speech just no, I think I know what you've been spending your time doing. Ino hung her head in shame. Her sensei's stern look turned soft a little. But that's what I'm here for. It's my job to motivate you to become an excellent kunoichi. However, how far, will be up to you. Ino grinned and nodded with determination. Shikaku returned the grin and turned to Shino. Your turn. My name is Shino Aburame. My hobbies are collecting rare insects for my family, training with my father and Kikaichu, and spending time with my friends. Naruto smiled at Shino. The boy was coming out his shell and enjoyed spending time with Naruto and his friends. My dislikes are people who kill insects without reason, insecticide and fire. My dreams are to one day take over my clan and lead them to a time of prosperity. One where my family is brought into the light instead of hiding in the shadows. The boy felt a hand pat his shoulder. Shino turned to see Naruto and smiled slightly at the blonde's friendship gesture. My abilities include the academy's jutsu and taijutsu. They also include my family's taijutsu style, a form of fighting that is derived from an old form of kung fu called Chao Gar, the mantis style. My jutsus include tracking, making a couple of clones from my Kikaichu, and a few others I'm afraid I must keep secret. At least for now. Fair enough, said Shikaku. You're right along where I thought you would be. Although, your jutsus are limited only to your Kikaichu. We might have to add some elemental jutsu to your arsenal once we find out what your element is. Shino nodded. He only knew it was a matter of time before he had to learn his element. And our finalist, said Shikaku to Naruto. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. My hobbies are pulling pranks, training, hanging out with my friends, working at my pop's ramen stand, and spending time with my girlfriend. Shino and Shikaku smiled at the mention of friends, which they knew the boy treasured very much, while Ino's mouth fell open in shock. Wait, you have a girlfriend? Asked Ino. Ino, let him finish, Shino interrupted. My dislikes are people who blame others for problems they have no control over, traitors, and anyone who threatens the people I care about. My dream is to one day become Hokage and earn the village's respect my own way. My abilities are everything that I was taught at the academy. I know the shadow clone jutsu and my own personal jutsus, ramen style. Shikaku chuckled. The Hokage and Iruka informed me what happened last week. I heard that bind of yours is deadly and your slingshot is accurate. I may have to watch my back when we spar. Also, with your abilities, you might be the key person in capturing our opponents. Ramen jutsu. That sounds pretty stupid to me, scoffed Ino. Naruto gritted his teeth. Maybe you'll find out. Okay, calm down, said Shikaku. Then his face turned serious. Now, it's time to get on with the real deal. Yes, sir, exclaimed Naruto. What will be our first mission, sensei? You will not be going on a missions right now. In fact, you will have one final test just to see if you are worthy of becoming shinobi of the leaf. Sort of a test to become genin. What? Ino squawked. We already passed to become genin. Why do we need to be tested again? I'm afraid that was a test to see who actually qualified to be shinobi, Shikaku explained. This test will decide who will become actually genin, seeing that the council only wanted 9 applicants on the active roster. Everyone else will return at the academy for more training. So only 3 teams will pass, stated Shino. Correct. All tests will be given tomorrow. It's noon, so you 3 have until 8 a.m., when your test begins to prepare. Get a good, light breakfast eaten, bring all of your ninja tools, and be here at this field on time to take your test. What will be our test, sensei? Asked Shino. I will tell you when the time comes, said Shikaku. He stood up and brushed the grass of his legs. I wish you all the best of luck. Because as troublesome as it is, I would actually like to see what you kids would do under my tutelage. With that, he shunshined away. Team 10 was silent for a moment before Ino stood up, brushed off her skirt and began to walk off. Ino, where are you going? Asked Naruto. If I hurry, I can try to catch Sasuke-kun going home. If the tests are tomorrow, his team might be getting out. Naruto sighed, jumped up and leapt in front of Ino, blocking her path. Ino, I think Shikaku-sensei gave us this time to form a plan for tomorrow. What makes you say that? Ino asked skeptically. He said that only 9 applicants are going to pass. We will when he gives us our test for tomorrow. And I asked if 3 teams were going to pass, pointed out Shino. 3 teams, not 9 applicants. Shikaku-sensei agreed with Shino, whether it was intentional or by accident, said Naruto. If they wanted 9 applicants to pass, they would have paired us individually with a Jonin sensei and tested us one-on-one. Instead they put us in teams. The council and academy would not put us in teams of 3 if they didn't want us to pass as a team, finished Shino. And besides, I don't think Shikaku-sensei would make us learn about each other if he didn't want us bond as a team, added Naruto. Ino put her hands on her hips. Okay, let's say for one moment I agree with you too. What do we do now? We train, answered Naruto. We form several, different battle strategies to prepare for whatever Shikaku-sensei has planned for us tomorrow. That way, we'll be prepared for whatever he's got for us. It will most likely be some type of strategy that will relate to our team, suggested Shino. Shino's got a point. We need to find a way in which our abilities will attribute one another. Sensei said we are a combination of all Katagwars, so we should find of ways of combining them. Shino and Naruto started at Ino, waiting for her answer. After a minute of silence, she shook her head in resignation. Fine. Where do we begin? Naruto smiled. I think we should begin on sparring, just to see how far we are in our fighting abilities. Then, we'll work on creating combo attacks with our jutsus and form strategies on how and when to use them. So, who spars first? Asked Ino. Naruto's smile turned dark as he pulled a ball of dough from his pocket and began to toss it around. Ino, my dear, you said something about my style being stupid. Asked Naruto sweetly. Www. It's in my hair. Get it out. Whined Ino as she pulled out clumps of ramen dough out of her blonde locks. It was several hours later, the sun was beginning to set and bathe the grounds with an orange glow. Team 10 finished their training and was now walking through town, hopeful that their work was not a waste. They spared to find out who was the strongest fighter, which turned out to be a tie between Shino and Naruto. Ino was an average fighter with great speed and flexibility, but not enough stamina. Shino was a more seasoned fighter, having trained with his father since he was a boy. But he relied too much on his Kikaichu insects instead of his mantis style. Naruto had stamina, strength, and speed. However, he was limited only to what he learned in the academy. Iruka tried to give him as much coaching as he could, but Iruka didn't have a definitive style either. Then they showed each other their jutsus. Like she said, Ino was limited only her father's mind possession technique. Shino's capabilities were mostly linked to his insects. Such techniques were creating clones with them, forming a protective dome around himself, and using them to swarm his opponent and drain their energy. Naruto's techniques ranged from his newly developed shadow clones, noodle bind, and his ramen slingshot. He also showed them a new one he was working on, which worked, but had unusual results. I'm going to get you for this, Ino grumbled again. She finally got the clump she was working on and began working on another. Sorry about that, Ino, Naruto apologized. But you did deserve it. The hell I did, yelled Ino angrily. And I still think your style is ridiculous. Naruto sighed and kept walking. Even if his style was a little childish, he was taking this more seriously than Ino. Throughout their practice, all she did was complain about missing the time she could be spending with Sasuke. Naruto and Shino had just about had it. But then Naruto's mood changed when he saw Ichiraku's and Team 8 sitting on the chairs. He walked into the stand with Shino right behind and the two sat in the remaining chairs. You've become a bad influence on us, Naruto, Shikamaru muttered as he drank a cup of tea. For some odd reason, I can't seem to end my day without at least an hour of cloud watching on my family's roof and having a meal here. It's very troublesome. You know you like it, Choji mumbled through a mouthful of noodles. It's like our unofficial rule. I also enjoy it, smiled Hinata. It's the only place I can feel like I belong. Everyone's mood shifted when she said that. They knew the problems she had at home trying to convince her father and clan she was a good shinobi. You belong anywhere your friends are, said Tuki as he put a bowl of ramen in front of Shino and Naruto. That's where your true place is. Believe it, Naruto added, causing everyone to groan chuckle. Hey, cried Ino from outside the stand. Where am I supposed to sit? Naruto had completely forgotten about Ino. He thought she would go straight home or find out where Sasuke was. She just stood silently outside with her hands on her hips and a scowl on her face. Sorry about that, Ino. Here, take my seat, Naruto offered. He picked up his bowl and went behind the counter to sit on the spare Tuki had. Ino sat down. So this is the ramen stand you work at, she said. I got to say, it doesn't look like much. Naruto glared at her while Tuki just chuckled. I know we're not the glamorous place to eat in Konoha, but offer the best ramen you could find anywhere, Tuki said happily. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Even the Sandame eats here, Shino said, hoping to encourage Tuki's business. He had grown very fond of the place. I'll believe that when I see him here, in the flesh, Ino scoffed. She then scowled at the ramen everyone was eating. Personally, I don't see how anyone could eat that stuff. It's fattening, unhealthy, and does nothing for your figure. So, all the kids chorused. Everyone there ate healthily and smart. No one besides Naruto and Choji ate more than a bowl a day. Shikamaru mostly just drank the green tea Tuki served, Hinata ate rice balls that the stand had begun to serve, and Shino just came for a bowl and to spend time with his friends. Ino just sighed loudly and crossed her arms. She then looked around the stand. So where's this girlfriend of yours, Naruto? She's out making a delivery, answered Tuki. She's done with the delivery, said Ayame as she walked under the curtains. Hello everyone. Hi, Ayame, everyone answered back. Ayame walked behind the counter and placed the delivery bag onto the counter. She then kissed Naruto on the cheek, who smiled back at her. You're Naruto's girlfriend? Ino asked in shock. The brunette, to Ino, was very pretty. She couldn't believe a girl like this liked Naruto. Oh, you must be Naru-kun's new teammate, smiled Ayame. She stood behind Naruto and placed her chin on his shoulder. My name is Ayame and yes, I'm his girlfriend. Naruto is the biggest goofball in our class. How can you like him? You're so pretty and, well, old, reasoned Ino. Time pretty much just froze as Naruto's friends stopped whatever they were doing with a look of horror on their faces. Tuki's jaw dropped and he inched away from his daughter. Naruto just rolled his eyes at Ino's stupidity. The amount of killer intent flooding the stand was enough to smother everyone. If they weren't ninjas, they would have probably run away in fear. In fact, Several civilians outside had mysteriously vanished at Ino's words. Old, Ayame said sweetly. Shino, who was a very calm and collected person when in danger, actually grabbed his stool and began to hop away from Ino. I'll have you know that I'm only 16. And I would appreciate it that you shut your mouth, princess, before you lose all the teeth inside it. Ino glared at Ayame. That's a lot of talk coming from a waitress. Why don't you put on your apron and be a good little THWAWK? Ayame's trusty cleaver was halfway into the counter. Ino looked at and swallowed, but tried to keep the glare on her face. The next time I swing this, it's going to cut through the pretty ponytail of yours, princess. And I never miss. The two girls just glared at each other, one with full confidence while the other's was fading. After a few seconds, Ino got up and walked to the curtains. But she turned around just before she walked out. I still don't believe you're Naruto's girlfriend. There's no way the idiot could grab a girl like you. Ayame stared at her a moment before whirling around, grabbing Naruto by his jacket, and placed a very passionate kiss on his lips. Everyone's mouth dropped open in surprise. Tsuki dropped his spatula, Hinata's rice ball fell out of her hands, Choji dropped his chopsticks, Shikamaru lost the grip on his cup, and Shino's glasses fell to the tip of his nose. After about 10 seconds, Ayame finally let a dazed, but happy Naruto go. She took a deep breath and whipped the hair out her eyes. That's because I grabbed him, she smirked at Ino. The blonde girl gasped like a fish before spinning on her heel and storming out of the stand. Everyone inside looked at each other before laughing. Oh, man, that was priceless, gasped Shikamaru between breaths. For the next couple of hours, everyone just talked about their teams. Shikamaru groaned, but grinned slightly, when he heard Team 10 got his father as a sensei. He told Naruto and Shino that if they pass tomorrow, they'll be working hard for the rest of their genin years, despite the fact Shikaku could be just as lazy as his son. Team 8's sensei ended up being a woman named Kurenai Yuhi, a kunoichi who had mastered the genjutsu arts. Shikamaru kept muttering about how troublesome it was to have two women ordering him around, his mom and now his sensei. Hinata, who had really like her teacher, told the lazy ninja that if he didn't straighten up around her, he'll have 3 women ordering him around. Shikamaru just gaped while everyone else applauded Hinata, who blushed brightly but grinned. When it was time to close up and his friends had already gone home, Naruto volunteered to clean up by himself. Pops, Ayame, you guys go ahead and go home. I'll use my clones to clean up. Are you sure? Asked Tsuki. Naruto formed a few hand signs and 5 clones poofed beside him. Once they formed, they immediately started cleaning and packing ingredients. The original smiled at the Ichirakus. I think'll be okay, replied Naruto. Tsuki looked around before bursting in tears. He hugged the boy he always thought of as a son. I never been more proud of you, cried Tsuki. With your clones, who needs to me, you, or Ayame to clean up? You can do it all from now on. Naruto frowned, but patted Tsuki on the back. He's proud of me because he doesn't have to work. Is that normal? Tsuki let go and began to walk back to his house, rubbing the tears from his eyes. Don't forget to lock up, he called as he walked away. Ayame shook her head at her father. Don't listen to him, Naruto. He's had to clean the stand every single night for the past, so he believes that this is a sign from a higher power. What about you? Are you proud of me? Ayame hugged the boy and kissed his cheek. I've always been proud of you. Naruto smiled and hugged her back. But she suddenly let go and began following her dad. Thanks for the night off, Naru-kun. She called out cheerfully. Naruto was stunned for a few moments before he shook his head and grinned. Girls. Who can figure them out? While his clones worked, he pulled out Tsuki's record book and began to balance the day's register. He frowned at the losses, which were beginning to grow again. He saw that the money from Mizuki's capture had helped for a moment, but was now back to its original losses. He had just began to finish the last record when he heard the bell attached to one of Curtin's ring. I'm sorry, but were closed, Naruto said without looking up. I'm afraid we're not here to order something, said an old, authoritative voice. One belonging to a man. We're here to discuss your future. Naruto froze a moment before slowly looking up. There were two figures standing near the counter. One was a man wearing a blue kimono with a white, long-sleeved jacket over it. A short, gray beard covered his stern face and was wearing a pair of green glasses. The other figure was a woman, dressed in a light, gray kimono, an orange sash and a dark, gray jacket similar to the man's. Her hair was tied up on top her head with two small buns. He recognized them as the Sandame's old teammates. Naruto stood up and bowed in respect, despite the tension he was beginning to feel. Homura-sama and Koharu-sensei. I'm honored that you've come here to Ichiraku's, though I'm deeply sorry that I don't have anything to serve you with. If you can give me a few moments, I can heat some herbal tea. Homura began to say something when Koharu interrupted him. That will be fine, Naruto-san. We can wait. Naruto nodded, dispatched his clones, and then created 3 new ones to make the tea. While they waited, Naruto finished his records and wrote the latest low number for their income. He sighed and set the book aside, just as one of his put 2 steaming mugs of tea in front of the 2 elders. As they grasped their cups, the clones dispelled themselves. So, what can a genin of Konoha do for the advisors of the Hokage? Koharu took a sip and put it back down on the counter. Naruto-san, you are much more than a genin. You're the last symbol of hope for this village. Naruto knew what they were talking about, but decided to play dumb. I have no idea what you mean, Koharu-sensei. You know what we mean. Snapped Homura, banging his cup on the counter and sloshing tea on it. Stop acting like a blind fool, Naruto Namikaze. Naruto felt his temper rise, but didn't let it get to him. Homura-sama, as I told the Hokage, I'm not going to accept the name of the man who sealed the Kyuubi in his own son. He turned me into a weapon that would serve the village like a faithful soldier. Are you saying you won't be faithful? Asked Homura angrily. I will never betray my village, growled Naruto. I'll protect it, my family, and my friends with my dying breath. But do you know what I've had to live through before I met the people I care about? I was more alone than you could possibly imagine. I had no one except the 3rd Hokage as a friend. And to this very day, I'm still looked at as the demon that attacked the village 12 years ago instead of an orphan who lost his parents. Accepting your true name could change that, Koharu said gently. I highly doubt the whole village would accept me as the son of the 4th Hokage. And even it did, don't you think the 4th's enemies would realize his legacy survived and would want to take revenge on the village once again? By learning your father's secrets, you could prevent that. His archives and library at his estates contain several of the most powerful jutsus ever created, persuaded Homura. Then, with his jutsu at your and the village's disposal, you can strike fear into your enemies and guarantee your position as Hokage. If I'm going to become Hokage, I'm going to do it my way, said Naruto. Through my own power and will, not by names. Also, even I accept his legacy, I would only put the village in more danger. Homura sighed. Don't you understand how important your father was? I know, said Naruto. I will say this. The 4th Hokage was an extraordinary man, a powerful shinobi, and a hero to this village. But he condemned me to a hard life. He decided my fate when he sealed the Biju in me. I was only a newborn and yet, he knew my life was going to more difficult than any other person. Homura began to say something else, but Koharu put a hand on his arm to silence him. Then she turned to Naruto. I think it's about time we left. I'm sorry to have bothered you so late in the evening when you still have your genin test to take tomorrow. Koharu put several coins on the counter, more than enough for their tea. Good luck. Naruto bowed to them as they left. It hadn't been a pleasant conversation, but it could have been worse. Homura stepped back into the streets and walked away. Koharu lifted the curtain, but then turned back to Naruto. To be honest, Naruto-san, I agree with you. What your father did was not the best course of action. But please ask yourself one question. What would you do in his position? After all, when you become Hokage, you'll have to make such decisions. Before he could answer, she left. Naruto finished his work and locked the stand. He walked home, thinking about his team's strategies for tomorrow. He played Lugia's song to help calm his mind so he could sleep easier. However, his mind still buzzed with Koharu's question. What would you do? Naruto got up early the next day so he could prepare for his test. He packed his shuriken, kunai, explosive tags, some ninja wire, and, of course, ramen dough. His holsters were strapped to his right leg while 2 pouches were strapped to his waist. Each zippered pouch carried about 5 pounds of dough. He hoped it was enough. A few stretches, a quick breakfast, then he chakra hopped to his training grounds. He arrived with 20 minutes to spare. Just a minute later, Shino hopped into the clearing as well. Good morning, Naruto, Shino greeted. Hiya, Shino. Ready for today? Naruto asked eagerly. More or less, answered Shino. Is everything in place? Naruto patted his pockets, where his dough was kept. Ready. Are your, they're in place. Do I want to know where mine is? No. Good. What are you two talking about? Asked Ino as she walked up to them. Her eyebrow was arched in suspicion. Nothing, said Shino and Naruto. Ino huffed and sat down on the grass with her arms crossed. Naruto glanced at Shino. She's going to kill us when she finds out. Most likely, agreed Shino. The three waited patiently for 8 o'clock and for their sensei to arrive. Shino and Naruto were going over each battle strategy. They tried to get Ino in, but she just scoffed and went back to staring at the landscape. At 8, Shikaku's shode landed just a few meters away. Ino sat up and the boys quit talking. Good morning everyone, yawned Shikaku. Good morning, sensei, chorused Team 10. Their sensei spent the next moments yawning and stretching his back. As troublesome as it is, we have to get started on our test to see how well you three qualify as shinobi instead of spending such a nice day like this watching clouds float by. So what will our test be, sensei? Asked Naruto. A simple one, smiled Shikaku. He held his arms wide open. Your test is simply to capture me. Team 10 stood stock still before Ino exploded. What? Capture you? What kind test is that? I'll explain. The village will accept only the elite of Genin into their roster. 9 teams were formed, 9 applicants will be selected. Your task is to capture me, a Jonin, to the best of your abilities. The one who captures me will be selected into the active roster while the other 2 will be sent back to the academy for more remedial training. Shikaku dropped his arms. To make it interesting, I want you to capture me dead or alive. Use all of your weapons and ninja tools, because I want you to come at me with the intent to kill. But that could be very dangerous. You could get killed. Maybe, sighed Shikaku. If I get killed by you three, then I deserve it. It shows how soft I've gotten. So just capture you, Naruto said simply. Shikaku nodded. You three have until noon. By that time, if none of you have captured me, all of you will be sent back to the academy. Ino stiffened while Naruto and Shino did nothing. The two just stared at Shikaku with determination in their eyes. I will not step outside the boundary of training field 5, so that gives you another advantage. However, when you attack, I will fight back. I should also warn you, I won't go easy on you either. Now go. Team 10 hopped away and hid in the shadows surrounding the small field they were previously in. Shikaku smiled at their abilities. Well, not bad. They know how to conceal themselves well. Now, let's see how this plays out. Naruto waited on the branch of a tree, watching his sensei walk around the training field, who was watching the sky. To a civilian, it looked like the man was just taking a stroll while cloud gazing. But the blonde could see Shikaku's eyes dart back and forth across the field. It was quick, but enough for a trained shinobi. The boy knew what his sensei was trying to do. He made it so obvious when he was trying to hide it. They were meant to pass this test as a team. The Hokage and Academy wouldn't pair 3 students together, only break them up the next day. Team 10 was formed under specific circumstances because their abilities would make them a strong team, because they would benefit themselves and the village. Naruto felt the branch he was standing on slightly shake. He turned around to see Shino perched near the trunk. "So what do you think?" asked Naruto. "Like we said, it's about teamwork," nodded Shino. Naruto nodded back. "Let's go find Ino and try to convince her to work together." Shino suddenly froze, then groaned. Naruto looked at him skeptically. "We're too late," Shino said, pointing to the field. Naruto followed his gaze and groaned as well. "Let's do this," Ino called out to her sensei. She got into the basic defense stance taught at the academy. "If I can capture a Jonin, I can rub in Forehead's face that I'm a better kunoichi for Sasuke-kun's love." Shikaku, meanwhile, ignored her and continued to watch the sky. He chuckled. "That one looks like a duck." Ino's eyes went white. "Hey, pay attention. I'm trying to fight you." Shikaku sighed and turned to Ino, not bothering to fight back. "Ino, have nearly 3.5 hours before the test is up. Why are you engaging me now when you could wait for a better opportunity? All you've been doing is cloud watching for the past half hour. When are you going to prepare yourself?" "When it's you, I don't think I need to be prepared," smirked Shikaku and crossed his arms. "I think the result will be the same. After all, your dad couldn't lay a hit on me, so why should you?" Ino froze for a second before charging her sensei with rage in her eyes. "You're dead," she cried. She threw a punch at her Shikaku, who back his head the slightest. It was just enough to miss by mere centimeters. Ino used the momentum to use a front kick at his stomach. Shikaku leaned his head forwards, sucking his gut back. Again, she missed by centimeters. Ino spun and swung a roundhouse kick to his head, but was once again dodged. Frustrated, Ino increased the speed of her attacks in hopes to land a hit, but her coordination became wild and unbalanced. And each, Shikaku would make only the slightest motion to dodge, duck or dip. He barely moved from his spot and didn't even uncross his arms the whole time Ino was attacking him. It wasn't long before Ino exhausted herself. Cursing, she leapt back near the edge of the forest. Ino reached into her holster and threw several shuriken stars at Shikaku. However, instead of dodging or blocking them, the Jonin just smirked and plucked the stars right out of the air. Ino's mouth fell open in surprise. "Nice try, Ino, but not good enough. You let yourself get frustrated, in which you were blinded by your anger." He took a few steps forward, where Ino took several steps back. "First lesson of being a shinobi, taijutsu. You've just been tested and I must say, you showed more talent than I thought so." Ino backed up into a tree, but didn't take her eyes of her teacher. Shikaku threw Ino's shuriken at her. They impacted next to her shirt, her forearm sleeves, and her skirt. The stars were embedded halfway into the tree, pinning her to it. She struggled, but couldn't get free. "Now get ready for lesson number 2, said Shikaku as appeared only a meter away from Ino. He looked into her eyes and held the ram symbol with his hands. Ino froze. Her vision was suddenly filled with blowing leaves. She felt her eyelids get heavy. The more leaves appeared, the more Shikaku began to disappear. Finally, she closed her eyes. Naruto and Shino watched as Ino's head dropped. Once she was unconscious, Shikaku unfolded his hands and leapt into the trees. He completely disappeared from their sight. A few seconds later, Ino began to stir and wake up. She looked around, confused, before looking up. They saw her freeze, her face pale. "What's wrong with her?" asked Naruto. "I think Shikaku-sensei put her under a genjutsu," answered Shino. "Which means he must still be close by. But what is she seeing?" There were 3 hornet nests above her head. 3 giant nests. She already saw a few red hornets fly from the hive when she slightly shook the tree earlier. Each one was the size of her fist and had stingers that were bigger than the teeth on her combs. The sounds of dozens of wings was beginning to fill her head and block out any other sound. As every second passed, Another hornet would fly out of a hive and another would fly closer to her face. Ino tried to keep very still, but by now, she was beginning to hyperventilate. Her breaths increased when she felt the wind from on the wings beating on her face. Kai. A voice called out. Immediately, the hornets and hives disappeared. Ino looked to see Naruto and Shino standing in front of her. Shino had his hands in tiger symbol. Ino, are you okay? Naruto asked as he pulled the shuriken that pinned her to the tree. Ino didn't respond, instead she fell down. Very hard. Ino, are you okay? Hornets, hornets, she kept mumbling as she rocked back and forth, holding her knees. Shikaku-sensei must have put a nightmare genjutsu on her, explained Shino. I've heard about. It forces the victim to encounter their worst, physical fear. He looked at the girl still shivering. The jutsu has a few levels of strength and horror. Sensei's must have been only level 1. It's enough to freeze someone for a few minutes. We need every second, Shino, argued Naruto. He got down on one knee and grabbed Ino's shoulders. Ino, snap out of it. We need to get a move on. Ino kept stock still as Naruto shook her. She only kept mumbling. It's no use, Naruto. She'll stay like that until the adrenaline runs out of her system. There's no way to. Shino trailed off when he saw Naruto begin to smirk. I see why Hinata and the others begin to sweat when you get that look. Watch this, giggled Naruto. He remembered one of Ino and Sakura's arguments and believed he could use it. He leaned his face close to Ino's. Sasuke's mine, Ino pig. Ino jerked and her eyes, filled with fear, suddenly became filled with rage. No way, forehead, she yelled and threw a right hook. Naruto, surprised by Ino's snap into reality, caught the punch with his jaw and flew back several meters. Ino frowned and began to look around, confused. What happened? You were put under a genjutsu, explained Shino as he watched Naruto pick himself up and rub his swollen jaw. With the way you were mumbling, I'm guessing, hornets. Ino nodded, looking solemn. I once stepped on a nest when I was picking flowers for my family's shop. I received dozens of stings and had to be sent to the hospital. Since then, I freeze whenever one is around. No matter if it's one or a hive. Naruto walked up, holding his jaw. Sorry about that, Ino. I had to snap you out of your daze. But what you did earlier was stupid. Earlier, Ino would have squawked and tried to pound the boy to a pulp. But now, after being thoroughly defeated by their sensei with such ease, she knew he was right. I know, but only of us is going to pass, so I had to do something. I won't lose. Naruto sighed. Ino, remember what we talked about yesterday? We were paired as a team because the village needs a workable team to protect it. We were paired because the Hokage believes our skills would benefit the village and make us a strong team. But, we're not meant to pass as individuals, only to be paired up once again, said Shino. Shikaku-sensei organized this test to see if we have what it makes to put aside our differences and work together. We're stronger together than we are apart. Ino hugged her body and walked away from the boys. Naruto began to walk after her, but Shino grabbed his arm, stopping him. Naruto then realized Shino was right. Ino needed to figure this out for herself. They couldn't force her to do this. For several minutes, Ino just stared into the forest where their sensei dwelled, waiting for them. She always wanted to be a shinobi to impress her father, Inoichi. He always wanted a son in hopes that he would carry on her family's clan name. But when she was born and her mother couldn't have any more children, her father was devastated. So she asked him to join the academy when she was old enough. Inoichi was against it, while her mother supported her decision. In the end, he finally agreed. But the more she studied, the more she wanted to win the affections of the top student, Sasuke Uchiha. She did it for love, but also to compete with Sakura. And the more she became a compatible kunoichi, the more her father realized his mistake and wanted to teach his daughter his clan's techniques. However, Ino refused and wanted only to win Sasuke's affection. Now, she realized her mistake. She was easily defeated. Even though her opponent was a Jonin, she should have put up a better fight. She was blinded by anger when she should have been calm and collected. She took a deep breath and turned to her teammates. Okay, where do we begin? She asked with a determined look. Naruto smiled. That's the spirit. He turned to Shino. Do you know where Sensei is? Shino nodded. My insects already know his location. Ino was shocked. How? During our meeting earlier, I placed a female Kikaichu onto his body, Shino explained. He held out one finger, which a single Kikaichu was perched on. This is a female, like the one I place on Shikaku-sensei. She excretes a chemical that lures all of the males to her. This way, I can find sensei within a 50-mile radius. That's brilliant, beamed Ino. But what do we do now? Remember our plans from yesterday? Asked Naruto with smile. After a quick review of their plans, Shino led the way through the trees. The chemicals excreting from the female placed on Shikaku was telling his queen and males that Shikaku was traveling north. This way, Shino said to his teammates. He veered a little to his left and jumped through the treetops. Naruto and Ino turned and followed in his direction. How close are we? Asked Naruto. Sensei is half a kilometer ahead of us. You two should break off now and prepare for the plan. Right, said Ino and Naruto. They broke away from Shino and got into their positions. Shino, meanwhile, continued forward to the destination his female Kikaichu was telling him. A few more hops and he ended up in a small clearing surrounded by a ring of trees. They casted several shadows across the small area with the sun still rising in the east. And there, lying on his back looking at the sky, was Shikaku. Hello, sensei, said Shino casually. He raised his arms, letting his insects flow out of his sleeves. Once they exited, they hovered around his head, buzzing up a storm. Clever, Shino. Very clever, said Shikaku, who sat up slowly and brushed the dirt from his pants. You're the decoy while your teammates get in position to attack. Your insects, as loud as they are to provide cover so I can't hear them sneak up on me. Shino raised an eyebrow in surprise. He knew it couldn't be this easy to sneak up on his sensei, but he could hope. The question is, how are you going to approach this? Like this, answered Shino. He sent his insects forwards. Half his swarm shot forward like arrows towards his teacher. Shikaku waited until the last moment before dodging the swarm by leaping over them. He landed on the other side of the field, but dodged again when the swarm changed direction and flew towards him, this time from above. Shikaku shunshined and appeared on the other end of the field, causing the insects to follow him. When his teacher landed, Shino sent the rest of his insects towards his teacher's blind side. But before they could reach him, Shikaku ran through a couple of hand signs, finally ending in the tiger seal. Ninja art. Shadow barrier jutsu. He yelled. Instantly, a dark haze erupted from Shikaku's feet and spread out around him. Shino's insects continued to fly until they stopped still a meter away from his teacher. A few insects fell to the ground, crushed. Several continued to fly, even though they hovered against an invisible force. All the rest flew back to their host. A barrier, stated Shino. He then noticed where his teacher was standing. By standing in the shadow of the tree, you have used its shadow to enforce a shield around you. I could create a barrier from my own shadow, but by using the shadows of the trees, I can increase the size and strength of my shield, explained Shikaku. Normally, with my chakra capacity, I could summon a shield that would last 5 minutes straight and could stop anything below a B grade technique. However, with the trees, I can increase the time to half an hour and withstand anything below A grade jutsus. And physical attacks. As your insects found out, my barrier is impenetrable to physical attacks. You would need Shuza Akamichi's strength to break through my shield. Good thing I'm inside, yelled a voice. Shikaku spun around to see Naruto drop from the hidden branches, aiming an axe kick towards his teacher's head. Shikaku brought both his arms up, crossing them and blocking the kick. The shadow user cursed his carelessness. His barrier formed around him, not from him. Naruto must have already been within a few meters when he performed the jutsu. Once Shikaku made contact with Naruto, his concentration was broken and his barrier was shattered. He immediately heard the buzzing from Shino's insects behind him. Shikaku kicked Naruto in the stomach and flipped backwards over the swarm, landing back into the clearing. Naruto slammed into a tree and popped in a cloud of smoke. Shadow clones, stated Shikaku. What a drag. You think that's bad, said several voices hiding in the shadows. What till you see this? A dozen clones of Naruto burst through the foliage. Each one charged at Shikaku with a kunai in their hands. Crap, muttered Shikaku. He leapt into the air and kicked two in their heads. They disappeared, but two more emerged from the smoke with their fists drawn back. Shikaku ducked under their punches, then jumped straight up with two uppercuts to their chins. Once they disappeared, two more leapt through the smoke with a high jump kick. Shikaku, while still in the air from the uppercuts, spun his body around and swung his leg in a horizontal arc. Konoha Leaf Hurricane, Shikaku yelled. His kick ripped through the clones like they were nothing. He landed on the ground as the rest of clones surrounded him. What kind of move was that? Asked one of the surprised clones. Shikaku just grinned. I've got to thank Guy for teaching me that. But then he heard buzzing. Swarm, called Shino and brought his hands down in a slicing motion. Shikaku stood his ground, waiting for the opportune moment. When he felt the wind from the insect's wings, he made his move. The standard move for a graduating genin, substitution jutsu. With one of Naruto's clones. Ga! Yelled the clone as he was suddenly swarmed. A few seconds off futilely fighting them off before the clone popped when the insects absorbed its chakra. Shikaku smirked at the 5 remaining clones. Next. Each clone threw their kunais. Shikaku pulled out his own kunai and blocked them with ease, each one falling harmlessly to the ground. He then sheathed the knife and put his hand in the ram seal. Ninja Art. Shadow Weaving Jutsu. 1. His shadow stretched into 4 different points and raced across the ground towards the clones. In an instant, the 4 shadow points rose off the ground like snakes and struck the clones right in the chests. They popped into smoke. The shadows receded, leaving the real one standing face to face with his teacher. Whoa! Whispered Naruto. After all the skills his teachers showed in the academy, he was very impressed by what a Jonin was capable of. Step 3 of a shinobi, ninjutsu. What's your next move? Asked Shikaku. This, smiled Naruto. The next thing Shikaku knew, there were 5 bangs and the kunai the clones threw at him earlier had now transformed into 5 shadow clones. Caught by surprise, Shikaku immediately got on guard, but it was too late. 4 clones each grabbed a limb while the 5th clone grabbed him in a full Nelson. Now Ino! Yelled Naruto. The girl landed beside him with her hands in her family's seal. Mind transfer jutsu, she called out before falling over and being caught by Naruto. Shikaku's eyes closed as Ino entered his mind. After a moment, Ino's spirit merged his body and she opened his eyes. The first thing she saw was herself. Her helpless body held by Shikaku. She looked down to find herself wearing a dark, gray jacket with black shorts. She integrated her body with Naruto's while Shikaku used a substitution jutsu with Naruto's real body. Nice try, Ino, smirked her sensei. But after training with your father all these years, you don't think I would know how to dodge that move. Also, thanks to your inexperience, your spirit was shot out of your body about 3/4 slower than his. Quit bringing my father into this! Yelled Ino with Naruto's voice. Shikaku gently lowered Ino's body onto the ground then rose back up. I must admit, this a very thought out plan, you 3. I'm impressed. He turned and began to walk away. But you still haven't caught me yet. And you have 2.5 hours left. Shino raised his arms and directed his thoughts to his insects in attacking their teacher. But before they reached him, he disappeared with a shunshin. Ino sighed and jerked her arms out of the clones' grip. Then she remembered where she was. Ew! I'm in Naruto's body. She screamed with horror. Shikaku chuckled when he heard Ino screech. He was currently heading east, towards the more heavily wooded area of training ground. It was a place where he could really test their abilities. After Ino got back into her body, Naruto began to rub his arms furiously as he tried to scrub off any cooties he got. Whoa, that was real freaky, he muttered. I'm scarred for life, Ino said shakily as she rocked back and forth, holding her knees. You two quit being dramatic, Shino said. We're still in the middle of a test. We need to get moving. Right, agreed Naruto. Which way is Sensei heading? East. Okay, let's get going. Whoa, Ino said, trying to sit up. But before she could stand up straight, she fell back down. Ino, are you okay? Asked Naruto. I don't know, I just feel really weak right now, she said. Naruto and Shino dropped down beside her. Did you use too much chakra with your jutsu? Asked Shino. No, I should have plenty left. I don't know what's wrong, said Ino. There were a few moments of silence before a loud grumble came from Ino's stomach. Naruto's eyebrows rose. Ino, did you eat breakfast this morning? Ino suddenly blushed. Yes, 1 hard-boiled egg and a half cup of grapes. Shino's eyebrow rose. Ino, when Shikaku said we should have a light breakfast, I'm pretty sure he meant something a little more filling. We need as much energy as we can so we can keep moving, explained Naruto. Why did you eat so light? Ino sighed. I didn't think being a kunoichi would so strenuous. My dad and his stories, he made it sound so easy. So I spent my time dieting so I could be more athletic. I figured if I ate too much, it would only slow me down. She was silent for a moment before lowering her head. I also thought it would make me more pretty. Naruto sighed and pulled a small package from his pocket. Here, Ino. It's an energy bar, specially made to restore chakra and calories. It'll be enough to last you until the end of the test. Ino grabbed the package, tore open the package and shoved the bar into her mouth, chewing rapidly. She didn't even pause for a breath. Naruto and Shino watched with fascination, both speechless. While she ate, Naruto and Shino stood up. We'll wait a few minutes so she can get her strength back. Then we'll go after Shikaku-sensei. Shino nodded. So which one will lead the attack this time? Naruto looked at the sun. We have a 2.5 hours left. I'll lead the attack this time. It's your turn to capture. I'll do my best. 15 minutes later, Naruto was currently heading east. Shino had pointed in the general direction where their teacher might be. He and Ino would wait for Naruto's signal before coming as his reinforcements. Education. There were no clearings. He was surrounded by trees, each one only a meter away from another in either direction. The sun had still not fully risen in the sky, so sunlight was limited. In fact, it almost as dark as night. You know, echoed a voice from the forest itself. It's unwise to walk through the forest without knowing what's inside. A big, bad wolf might come and eat you. Naruto scoffed and kept walking. If you think a bedtime story is going to scare me, you've got another thing coming, sensei. This is my training field. You're on my home turf. Oh, really? So the explosive tags you've placed on several trees are your home field advantage? Naruto cursed. Several months ago, he placed exploding tags as a trap for anyone who would cross onto his field without permission. He had the third's consent to place dozens of low-level tags on trees to either surprise someone while he investigate or hopefully scare them off. These tags were not powerful enough to kill, or even injure. They were mainly used as a signal. Just to let you know, I've already disabled them. Naruto heard footsteps coming from the trees on his left. He turned to see Shikaku walking from the darkness. So what exactly is your plan? The last thing Shikaku expected was for the blonde to smirk. This, he said and hopped into the trees. Behind him were 3 clones. 2 were holding on to a tree and something else while the third was pulling whatever. Ah, crap, muttered Shikaku. Ninja art. Kunai slingshot. Called the clone as it let go of the ramen. 5 kunai were propelled towards the teacher at twice the speed of regular throw. Shikaku hit the dirt and the kunai sailed over him. He barely heard the whistle above when Naruto landed in front of his face. With a smile, he reared back his leg. Strike! Naruto yelled. Shikaku pushed and back flipped off the ground just as Naruto's foot grazed the tip of his nose. When he landed on his feet, he saw Naruto's clones begin to fire another volley of kunai. Shikaku back flipped again as the knives flew around him. You'll have to try harder than that, buddy, said Shikaku when he landed again. What about me? Called Ino as she burst through the foliage and launched a barrage of shuriken at Shikaku, who cursed and twisted his body with ease to dodge them. Each shuriken zoomed by and flew into the dark. A frontal assault is useless, you too, sighed Shikaku. Ino and Naruto regrouped, both of them in a defensive stance. He began to circle them. What do you hope to gain by this? This, Naruto said, holding a fist. Ino held one up as well. Your hands, chuckled Shikaku. What's that going? Shikaku froze when he felt his arm brush up against something that shouldn't be in empty space. He turned his head slightly to see the small glimmer of ninja wire. Wire that came from both Naruto and Ino's hand. He turned in the other direction to see the wire attached to the shuriken Ino threw earlier. Gazing around, he saw that he was surrounded by wire. Okay, so you've trapped me with wires. Now what? That's not all, sensei, said Ino. Shikaku frowned and looked again at the shuriken. The light shifted in the trees, revealing more of their trap that made Shikaku swallowed. The wire was not only attached to the shuriken, but also wrapped around several kunai. They were the kunai Naruto's clones threw earlier. And wrapped on the handles of the knives were several explosive notes. Not low-level ones. Very explosive notes. Double crap, Shika muttered. I'm really glad Ino has great aim, Naruto smiled at his teammate. Because now you're open for an attack. Swarm, said Shino, who appeared behind his friends. Immediately, his insects surrounded their sensei, forming a dome around him before launching themselves. He could sense his insects' hunger as they landed on their teacher. But before they could satisfy their hunger, he felt their confusion as their prey disappeared. He's gone, he stated to his friends. I saw, muttered Naruto. Your insects formed a man-shaped cloud before they dispersed. So he just vanished? Asked Ino. No, said Shino. He didn't vanish. I felt him disappear straight into the ground. He somehow merged with it. How? The shadows, said Naruto and a voice in the trees. Team 10 looked to see their teacher standing on a tree branch and leaning on a tree trunk. He was warmly smiling at students. It's a specialty among the more experienced Nara clan members. Just like my shadow barrier, I can increase my powers using the shadows in the area to my advantage. In this case, gardening, merging with the shadows themselves, finished Shino. That's how you were able to disappear from my Kikaichu's attack. You can merge your body with the shadows and can travel within them unnoticed. Very observant, Shino, praised Shikaku. You three are coming along nicely. I'm even more impressed. But the clock is ticking with only 2 hours left. This isn't over yet. We're just getting started, started Naruto, who pointed at his teacher. And you just might be on your final stretch. Shikaku grinned, but didn't give away his predicament. Using the cage crawl jutsu was always a double-edged sword. It was meant to be an escape jutsu, only used in emergencies. He could travel as far as the shadow stretched, but the move would always cost him half his chakra and would take hours to fully replenish. Perhaps, countered Shikaku. So I must do everything I can to prevent you from gaining an advantage. He pulled a kunai from his Jonin vest and threw it towards the paper bombs. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw it was one of his kunais with a exploding tag. Get down, he yelled, pulling Shino and Ino away from the area. He only had a second to take on jump before an explosion rocked the area. The team was knocked off their feet and landed a good distance away. Dirt and smoke enveloped the area, causing Naruto to cough. Waving the smoke away from his face, he slowly got up to his knees. Shino was getting back up and shaking the dirt out of his hair. Ino was slightly stirring. When they fell, Naruto and Shino instinctively covered her body with their own. Shino. I'm okay, Shino muttered. I'm fine as well, Ino coughed. She got to her knees, a look of gratitude on her face. Thank you. Both of you. Naruto smiled and rubbed the back of his head. No problem, Ino. That's what a teammate does. A small grin formed on Shino's face. We protect one another. Shikaku looked on with a smile. Everything was coming together accordingly and his team was bonding very quickly. He turned and hopped south. Naruto heard the branches creak in the distance, telling him his sensei was heading away. Well, we almost had him, muttered Ino. It was a good plan, Naruto, Shino said. We just underestimated him. Ino slouched dejectedly. So we're not really meant to beat him, are we? Try not to think of it like that, encouraged Shino. We are 3 genins against a jonin. We are meant to see how the skills we learned play into effect as well as the skills we learn on the field. We're learning how to adapt to our surroundings. This is not over, yelled Naruto, jumping to his feet with fire in his eyes. I'm not going to give up just because I'm getting my butt kicked. Shino chuckled softly, got his feet. Neither will I. Ino grinned wickedly and jumped to her feet. Me neither. We're not going to stop. We stand together and fight as one. The 3 chakra hopped towards Shikaku in the direction Shino's hive was telling them. Naruto lead the way south, towards their original location. Remember, we need to keep Sensei out of the shadows. The plan this time is to keep him in the open field. It will be easier this time since he's heading south, where there are less trees. Are you sure this will work? Asked Ino. It will, Shino reassured her. 3 minutes later, they arrived silently to the location. Only to find Shikaku calmly waiting for them. He was standing in the open field where the team met earlier. Well, that makes things easier, Ino said. The 3 were hiding behind the tree line that separated them from the field. Hold on. It could be a trap, Shino said. It is a trap, Naruto said. He's waiting for us. So what do we do? Naruto grinned. Spring the trap. A moment later, the 3 dashed through the tree line towards their teacher. But before they could reach him, Shikaku threw several shuriken at them. They ducked and threw their ones. Shikaku pulled a kunai from behind his back and blocked every star thrown. Well now, attacking is one this time. Intriguing, said Shikaku. But Naruto couldn't accomplish that with his shadow clones. What makes you think you can do it as a team? Well, for one thing, we don't think like him, said Ino with a smirk. Hey, and another thing is we won't pop when we're struck. So this is more of an endurance attack. Shrugged Shikaku. He got into his defensive stance. Well, alright, let's see how this will play out. The team and their opponent stared at each in silence, each one waiting for the other to make the first move. The wind shifted around them, causing the grass to bristle. Once it stopped, Naruto, eager as always, rushed forward. Behind him, Shino raised his right arm and several of his kikaichis followed right behind the blonde. Naruto swung a left hook at his sensei's head, who merely leaned his head back to avoid the blow. The blonde used the momentum, placed his hands on the ground and delivered a mule kick. Shikaku jumped back, but didn't get too far thanks to Shino's insects. His hive had surrounded the 2, trapping them. Before he could counter, he twisted to his left to avoid Naruto's swinging axe kick. Shikaku was in a pickle now. With the insects surrounding him, he couldn't stretch a string of chakra to perform a substitution jutsu without it hitting one of Shino's insects. So his other option was to perform a shunshin and appear further away. But he couldn't concentrate long enough to perform it with Naruto's current speed and his low chakra. Naruto could hardly believe it. Here he was, going toe-to-toe with his sensei and he was holding his own. He believed that it would be harder than this. But he wasn't one to turn back good karma, so he kept up keeping Shikaku moving. But then he goofed. Naruto went for a leg sweep, only for Shikaku to anticipate it and jump earlier enough to land on his leg. Pain shot into his leg as Shikaku leapt off his leg and land over the barrier of insects. However, Shino and Ino were there waiting for him before he had a chance to run. Ino swung her leg for a low kick while Shino jumped up for a spinning heel kick. Acting on instinct, Shikaku hopped and stretched his body sideways to avoid the two kicks. The teacher evaded the attacks, hit the ground, and dashed for the tree line. He now had enough time to perform a shunshin. Naruto saw this as his teacher avoided his teammates' attacks. He channeled chakra to his feet, propelling him off the ground and over Shino's insect barrier. He flew through the air, towards his sensei. As he fell, he threw a kunai at Shikaku's back. Shikaku must have heard the faint whistle of the kunai because he twisted his body to the right to avoid. But the move caused him to stumble. When Naruto landed, he charged to his sensei. His fist cocked back into a punch. However, his teacher surprised him with a back kick to the stomach, knocking the breath out of him and sending him flying across the meadow. Naruto hit the ground and kept rolling and rolling. He even kept rolling when he hit the water of a pond and skipped across. Naruto finally began to slow down. He channeled a stream of chakra through his feet and slid across the surface of the pond. When he stopped, he sunk a few inches before standing up a few inches. Then he sunk again. Well, this is impressive, said Shikaku, who appeared in front of Naruto, standing on the water. His teammates surrounded them at the edge in defensive stances. You already know the water walking chakra exercise. You have your son to thank for that, smirked Naruto. He took a step towards his teacher, but slipped and sunk down to his knees. Looks like you haven't fully mastered the exercise yet, said Shikaku. Well, that's something we can work on. If you pass, that is. We're going to pass. Believe it, yelled Naruto. He pushed chakra into this feat and shot off the water like a rocket. He swung an uppercut at his sensei's chin only for him to lean back to avoid the punch with ease. Naruto flew over his sensei and landed between his friends, who threw a handful of shuriken at their teacher. A flash of smoke and the stars impacted a log over the water. The log hovered in midair before falling into the pond. Where did he go? Asked Ino. Behind us, answered Shino without looking around. How do you know? Because we can't move, Naruto said. What do you? Ino started before she realized he was right. Hey, I can't move. What's happening? Shadow paralysis jutsu, answered Naruto. The Nara clan's signature move. They stretch out their shadows and merge it with their opponents. The prisoner is then forced to mimic the actions of the Nara in question. Let me guess, you've sparred against my son a couple of times as well, said a voice behind the three. Naruto felt his joints move against his will and turn him around. He crossed his arms over his chest, a copy of Shikaku's posture as he stood a few meters in front of them. He would sometimes spar with us. Only on days he considered it wasn't too troublesome, Naruto told him. Shikaku chuckled. Naruto, I still haven't figured out if a good or bad influence on my son. I believe it's the former. Well, when your son is not complaining all the time, he can be a good person to hang around. Hello, shouted Ino. Her posture matched Shikaku's. We're trapped here in a shadow and you're having a conversation with our opponent. What's wrong with you? Naruto sighed and nodded. All right, spring the trap. Shikaku barely had time to react when Naruto finished his sentence. As soon as stopped, Shikaku heard the faint whistle of several shuriken aimed at his back. He released his jutsu and jumped into the air. The stars whistled below his feet. Team 10 ducked and dodged stars thrown. Shikaku landed a distance away from his team. They were getting up off the ground from the quick attack. Shikaku turned to the trees from where the stars came from. His eyebrows rising were the only indication of his surprise. Standing near the trees was Ino and Shino. Shikaku turned to Team 10 who was grinning like kids in a candy store. The Ino and Shino beside Naruto poofed into smoke and two Naruto clones stood in their place. Shikaku groaned. You had two shadow clones transform into your teammates so I would focus on them instead of the sneak attack from behind. But how did you use Shino's Kikaichu? Naruto smiled. He placed them on me earlier when I made their clones. When it looked. Shino, was using them earlier, he was just controlling them from a distance. Naruto shuddered. Although, it was really disturbing feeling them inside my jacket. No offense, Shino. How to? D an expert content. None taken, said the bug wielder. It does take a while to get used to. And right now, it's time to end this, Naruto said. He pulled his last kunai from his pouch and charged his sensei. Ino and Shino charged forward from the tree line, cutting off the sensei's retreat. They were within attack range in seconds. Each one readied themselves for a kick, punch, or slash while their sensei just stood his ground. Naruto felt his jaw drop when his kunai went through his teacher's neck. It dropped even farther when Shikaku poofed away in a cloud of smoke. Naruto instantly thought, shadow clone, but then collided painfully with Ino and Shino. A flood of memories instantly flooded Shikaku's mind, but he ignored them. He busted out laughing at his student's train wreck. In all of his years of being a shinobi, he had not seen anything this funny in a long time. This actually makes it worth it being a sensei. Naruto groaned in pain. He was currently at the bottom of the pileup with Ino and Shino groaning on top of him. At least they were alive and he didn't accidentally cut someone with his knife. I should have known a shadow user would know the shadow clone jutsu, he groaned. Whose hand is that? Ino demanded angrily. Sorry, muttered Shino, pulling his hand off Ino's butt. This is very cute, you guys, said several familiar voices. Naruto pushed Ino's leg from his face to see at least a dozen shadow clones of their sensei surrounding them. The boy groaned and got back to his feet, pulling Shino and Ino up with him. How? Asked Naruto. You three, in a group hug, said one clone. It's very sweet, said another, wiping a fake tear from his eye. Ha ha, Ino said sarcastically. She turned to Shino. So which on is the real one? I don't know, Shino admitted. He held his hand out and one of his insects flew to his finger. This was the female I placed on him earlier. Sensei must have used his shadow clone from the very get-go. My insects can't tell which one is him. He has divided his chakra evenly between them. So all this time, we've been fighting a shadow clone. Ino gaped. That's right, all the clones onward. After all the training and experience I have, I've managed to produce a shadow clone that can endure at least a few body shots and gather its own chakra. It has a limit, but it's hard to figure out the difference between the real me and the clone. Wow, Naruto said in awe. I've got to learn that. I'll teach it to you, answered the clones. Then they got into attack positions. If you pass, you have only 1 hour left. Oh, we'll pass, said Ino. The three each got into their fighting stances. Believe it, Naruto yelled and the team charged their sensei's clones. By instinct, each one took on 4 of the clones with a fury they never knew they had. Shikaku, who had studied his students' profiles earlier, was shocked about how quick and accurate his students had become after 3 hours of fighting his clone. Most academy graduates would be too tired to keep up with their Jonin sensei, but his students were fighting with everything they had. Ino was furiously striking at her opponents with the ferociousness not shown by many kunoichi. She was using the basic academy taijutsu moves, but her speed was faster than earlier and her agility reminded Shikaku of a lion, with her pouncing and skills dodging his attacks. The real Shikaku's eyes widened when he received memories of one his clones Ino defeated. Apparently, she ducked under its left hood and then drove her knee straight into his clone's stomach. Shino was just as good, if not better. He took on his opponents with a skill not seen by many ninja, especially with the Abarame's status as outcasts. Shino fought Shikaku's clones with his family's style, a kung fu form that relied mainly on directing opponents' strikes and then retaliating instantly. It didn't matter which clone struck, Shino would deflect the strike, and then strike back. His speed made him look like he had several arms instead of just 2. The clones couldn't get one single hit and sometimes even got tangled with each other's arms. Shikaku almost gasped himself when received memories of a dispelled clone that received a palm strike to the chest. Naruto, frankly, scared the crap out of Shikaku. It was not his fighting style, which consisted mostly basic academy taijutsu, nor was it his strength or speed. Naruto had endurance that most jonins would kill to have. Already, his clones had laid 10 hard hits on the boy that would make most shunin either give up or be knocked out. The blonde would just grunt with pain before striking back with unmatched vigor. Naruto also had an uncanny ability to pull of moves that Shikaku didn't recognize from any style. One move, Naruto jumped over a clone's leg sweep only to grab the real Shikaku's head between his feet, twist in the air, and flip the teacher over onto the ground. When he landed, Shikaku felt the breath get knocked out of him. Despite Team 10's valiant efforts, they were still exhausted from their battles with Shikaku's clone earlier in the day. Ino's attacks became slower and slower before she finally stumbled. A clone's fist caught her in the stomach, lifting her off the ground and sent flying across the meadow. Shino was tiring as well. His arms were finally caught by the clones he was fighting. Then, they each gave him a sidekick each to his chest. He flew through the air, the breath knocked out of him. He landed only a few feet away from Ino, spitting out blood. Naruto was still fresh, but Shikaku and his clones had begun to adjust to Naruto's unique style. Naruto was finding it harder and harder to dodge or block Shikaku's attacks. He could feel the blows finally beginning to take effect on his bruised body. Then, Naruto overextended a punch, causing him to stumble. One Shikaku clone kicked him in the stomach, making Naruto grimace. The other clone caught the blonde with vicious uppercut to the chin. Finally, the real Shikaku finished it with a spinning heel kick, catching him in chest and sending him flying. He hit the dirt hard, creating a long divot that carried him to his friends. He took several deep breaths, trying to fill his lungs back up. Well, I must admit, you three have shown more talent in these past 3 hours than most genin have in the past 10 years, said Shikaku. He had gathered his clones around him. He still had 9 clones with him, each of them gazing with acknowledgement at his students. Naruto, holding a hand to his chest, slowly got back to his feet. Ino and Shino were struggling to sit up. Their bodies were racked with pain and exhaustion after their battle with Shikaku and his clones. But Naruto was not going to let it end this way. He reached to his side and unzipped the pouch. He turned to his side so he would let his teacher see what he was doing. Grabbing a handful of dough, he began to channel his chakra into it. He gave the slightest glance to Shino, indicating his plan. Shino nodded and pulled a smoke bomb from his pocket. He threw the bomb at Shikaku's feet, engulfing him and his clones in a cloud of smoke. Ninja art. Ramen bind jutsu. Naruto yelled, throwing the ball of dough at his teacher. He hoped he hit him even though he was obscured by the smoke. His hope was answered when he heard his teacher yelp with surprise. The smoke vanished quickly and there was Shikaku, wrapped in a rope of dough. Gotcha, smirked Naruto. Shikaku struggled against his bonds while his clones looked on in surprise. Now, this is a jutsu, Shikaku grunted. These bonds are stronger than any kind of rope or chain I've come across. Not only that, the chakra you've needed in the dough has cut off my ability to use a substitution jutsu or perform a shunshin. Whoa, I didn't know about that last part, Naruto said with awe. His friends were surprised as well. It's true, smiled Shikaku. Looks like I was right. Your jutsu could be considered high class. But then, Shikaku closed his eyes. A look on intense concentration was on his face before they snapped opened. Using what elbow room he had, he formed several seals. Shadow endgame technique. 2. Shikaku's shadow started creeping up his body. It was able to sink underneath the dough, then hook around it. Next, the shadows seemed to tighten and strain along with Shikaku's face. A loud grunt later, the dough around Shikaku snapped off and fell to the ground. Naruto had a look of disbelief while Shikaku stretched his arms out. But there's always a way to get out of any predicament if you put your mind to it, explained Shikaku. On last stretch, and he turned back to his students. You still have about an hour left. I'm going to give you a couple of options. One is that you quit now and I will send a recommendation to the Hokage and council about testing you again in another 6 months. Another option, if one of you quits being a ninja right now and spend the rest of your life being a civilian, I'll pass the other two. Finally, you can continue fighting this fight until time runs out and you're sent back to the academy and face another year of Iruka's lectures. Let's face it, you three are out of gas. And you haven't landed one good hit on me. Martial arts. Naruto kept his steel gaze on his teacher. He really wanted to pass. He wanted to show the village that he was not an outcast, that he wasn't the Kyuubi, but a ninja of the village. A shinobi with dreams of becoming Hokage. But, in the last few hours spending with his team, he realized he wasn't the only with dreams. Shino wanted to change his clan for the better and led them to a better life. One where they were seen in the light. Ino wanted to change and be a better kunoichi. Her skills had taken a tremendous leap in just a short time due to her determination. He couldn't let their dreams down. So, he took a deep breath and prepared to tell Shikaku he was quitting. "We're never going to quit, sensei," said Shino with a determined voice that Naruto had never heard. The blonde turned to see his teammates struggling stand on their feet. Their bodies were trembling with exhaustion and pain. Their faces were grimaced, but the stares were determined. "We're a team. We've discovered that when we saw how well we work together," explained Shino. "We either pass or fail. But if we're going to fail, we'll go back to the academy together," Ino said. Naruto smiled at his team, no, his friends. They were willing to keep on fighting, regardless if the passed or not. "Cute," said Shikaku. "But if you're going to pass, you might want to get a move on." "Oh, we'll pass all right," said Naruto with a new strength. "We might still have some tricks." "Like what?" Naruto turned to his friends. They nodded, and then leapt away from the clearing and towards the tree line. "Your teammates are retreating. That's exactly a sign of teamwork." "They're not retreating," smirked Naruto. "They're just getting out of the way." "For what?" Naruto answered by digging as much ramen dough he could from his pouches. He meshed it together, channeling as much chakra he could. Then, he channeled his chakra into his feet and leapt into the air, soaring above his sensei and his clones. When he began to hover in the air, he took his kunai and spun like a tornado in the air. Ninja Art. Ramen Storm. 3. Shikaku had no idea what the blonde was doing. It just looked like he was wasting a lot of energy spinning in the air. But then he heard a splat coming from one of his clones. He looked just in time to see the clone's eyes widen with surprise before dispersing. Then another clone popped. And another and another. The man barely had time to wonder what was happening when something landed on his arm, right in his elbow joint. He looked to see a small ball of dough on his skin. Then, the ball began to swell in size. In seconds, the ball had become the size of a basketball and kept on growing. As it grew, the dough became heavier and more attached to his skin. Soon, he wasn't able to move his arm at all because of the weight and the fact that his forearm and bicep had now become glued together. It was pretty much what Naruto said. It was a storm of ramen. Understanding the danger, Shikaku tried to hurry out of the rain of ramen. Several pops behind him indicated the rest of his clones popped. Then, another piece of ramen landed on his back, his other arm, and the very tips of his toes peeking through his sandal. Before he could continue, the ramen on his foot grew and became attached to the ground when he took another step. His momentum made him fall face first onto the ground. When he landed, the swelling dough on his arm stuck to the ground. Several more splats on his back and the growing weight made him pin to the ground. Before he could concentrate on using his shadow, he saw two pairs of feet in front of his face and two kunai pointed at his face. He tilted his head up to see the grinning face of Ino and the slightly smirking face of Shino. "Got ya, sensei," Ino said. Shikaku sighed. He knew was pinned. He underestimated Naruto's attack. "You got me." Team 10 chuckled. A moment later, the dough around Shikaku began to shrink and crumble into dust. When it was gone, Shikaku got up and brushed off his arms. Just how did you do that? Asked Shikaku. I combined yeast with dough for this attack, explained Naruto. Once it attached itself to a surface, the dough would rise up and gain weight from the air and my chakra, trapping my opponent. But there is a drawback. The jutsu only lasts for 15 seconds. Once time is up, the dough will crumble away. Shikaku shook his head with disbelief. Genius. You guys are a force to be reckoned with. So does that mean we pass? Asked Ino eagerly. Shikaku looked at his now formed genins. You have. Team 10 passes. When everyone caught their breath, they walked underneath a shady tree just a few feet from the creek. Ino immediately collapsed and rolled onto her back with eyes closed, taking several deep breaths. Shino leaned against the tree and slowly sat down, sighing with relief when he felt the pressure leave his legs. Naruto pulled off his sweatshirt, knelt beside the creek and dunked his whole head into the water, getting all the sweat from his hair. After remaining underwater for a few seconds, he rose up with a groan of relief and collapsed beside Ino. I've never felt so tired in my life, Ino groaned. That's a sign you worked your hardest, Ino, Naruto chuckled. Feels great, don't it? Ino chuckled lightly. It does, actually. I think we better get used to it, Shino muttered. Since we passed, feeling this tired will most likely is a factor from now on. That's right. We passed, Naruto cheered weakly. Yeah, Ino groaned, slowly rising her arms into the air. Shino's right, team, announced Shikaku. Unlike them, he still looked fresh and ready for another fight. Any trace of ramen from Naruto's attack was gone. And in his hands, he had 4 large bentos. Who's hungry? Ino immediately leapt up and grabbed the top box. She sat back down, ripped the package open and began scarfing down her lunch. Her chopsticks were a blur as she ate. Shino, his eyebrows raised at Ino, gradually took his box and began eating at a much slower pace than Ino. Naruto just smirked at Ino's new eating habits as he took his bento from his sensei. Everyone ate in silence for the next minutes. Naruto felt his energy being slowly restored with each bite. By the time he finished, all of his aches and weariness was gone. Too bad he couldn't say the same for his teammates. Ino was lying on her back, rubbing her full stomach while Shino was nodding off as he leaned against the tree. Okay, team, you have officially become genins of the Hidden Leaf Village, said Shikaku. As much of accomplishment as that is, you must know that from here on out, your lives are now devoted to your village. Any ideas of switching allegiance with another village will most likely have the consequence of being named a missing nin. Not only that, you will also been in constant danger. Each mission you take for the village has the possibility of becoming your last. If you can get it through your thick skulls, you are not indestructible. There is always going to be someone stronger, faster, and more intelligent than you. Understand? Yes, Shikaku-sensei, Team 10 chorused together. We knew the consequences when we signed up for the academy, said Naruto. We wouldn't be here now if we didn't consider the possibilities of one us perishing early in our lives, Shino explained. We are no longer children, but soldiers and weapons for our village, Ino said. Shikaku nodded. He was proud of his students for accepting their fates so earlier in a young age. When he was a genin, he was surrounded by several newbies who were so sure of themselves and bragged about how they were indestructible. Each one who bragged had perished before they even made chunins. I'm glad you all have accepted this fact, Shikaku admitted to his team. But I'll be damned if that will happen on my watch. Team 10 looked up at their sensei with confusion on their faces. Shikaku smiled and sat down on the grass. You guys are not just my students, you're my comrades. Teammates. For now on, we will become a family who will protect each other from our enemies with all of our strength and will. We will never abandon each other, never leave one behind, and always be there for one another in the darkest of times. Naruto looked at his team. He knew Shikaku would keep his work. His duty as a sensei to his students would always be true, but Naruto knew it would be deeper than that. From the stories Shikamaru told his friends, Shikaku and his friends were the most loyalist jonin in the village. Shikamaru said the battle scars on his dad's face were from defending his comrades during the Third Ninja War. Naruto turned to Shino and saw that he completely agreed with Shikaku's lecture. His posture was stiff, but Naruto could see from his visible facial expression that he was determined as his sensei to defend his friends. Shino caught Naruto's gaze and gave him a small, but firm nod. Naruto grinned and nodded back. When Naruto turned to Ino, he was surprised to see such strong expression on her face. During the academy years, he usually saw a look of indifference on her face during Iruka's lectures. But now, she seemed so determined and focused that it startled him. When Ino saw him staring, she grinned at him, letting him know she now serious about her ninja career. Naruto returned her grin and then turned back to Shikaku. I know that we're given a specific team specialty, but I think that's a bad idea. We're going to try something else. What do you mean, sensei? Asked Naruto. I thought you said that the teams were divided up into specific groups because of ability. That our team was a TIAT team. We will keep that rank, however, I believe that is a disaster waiting to happen. I plan on making you fully fledged shinobi, as troublesome as it is. Can you explain, sensei? Asked Ino. Sure. Like Naruto pointed out, we were paired up specifically for our abilities. However, I believe in the philosophy of expect the unexpected. With our status, we'll most likely be given missions that will be within our abilities. But what happens when we end up in a situation that is out of our league? What will we do then? Believe it or not, many shinobi deaths were not from losing to a stronger opponent, but from being ill-equipped for a situation. So you plan on training us in every possible ninja category, stated Shino. Shikaku smiled. Right on one. During our training sessions, I plan on training you in every possible element I can. Taijutsu, Genjutsu, Ninjutsu, Medical Ninjutsu, Kenjutsu, Tracking, Stealth and Assassination, Torture and Interrogation, Sealing, Summoning, Element Manipulation, and more. Ino gaped. Is it possible to learn all of that? We're going to try, chuckled Shikaku. I plan on turning you guys into the next Sannin. Shikamaru actually snorted. I think that might be a little impossible, Shikaku-sensei. We could never hope to amount to making Sannin level. This caused Shikaku to smirk. We'll just have to see then. Now, tomorrow is an off day. You three used up a lot of energy and almost ran out of chakra during our fight. So use tomorrow to recuperate. However, I still want to show up. We'll have a quick 10-minute meeting at noon before I'll let you go for the rest of the day. Why, sensei? Asked Ino. You'll see. Now, go home, get some rest and then come to my clan's house for dinner tonight. What? Asked Naruto and Ino. My wife wants to meet you guys, groaned Shikaku. Then, she got this brilliant idea to invite all of the 3 teams that passed tonight over for a giant barbecue. Choza and Inoichi will be there as well along with their kids, so feel free to bring your family as well, Shino. Shino nodded, but then saw the look sadness on Naruto's face. All 3 of them saw it. Feel free to bring your girlfriend and your pop along as well, Naruto. Naruto quickly switched to a smile. This would be the perfect opportunity to bring his family to a gathering where they won't be brought down for his burden. Shikaku got up from the ground and brushed the grass off his pants. Party starts at 7. Be sure to bring your appetites. And with that, he shushined away. Naruto groaned as he pulled himself up. Well, I'm going to go home and change. Kami knows I could use a shower. He held out his hand to Shino. He grabbed it and pulled himself up. Same here, Ino muttered. Can I have some help? Naruto and Shino each grabbed one of her hand and pulled her up. Ino groaned as her sore muscles stretched. I'm so glad Shikaku-sensei gave us the day off tomorrow. I wonder why we still have to meet him tomorrow though, asked Naruto. Who knows? Right now, I'm going home and taking a bath. I'll see you boys tonight, Ino said as she limped off, leaving Naruto and Shino watching her go. She has changed, right? Naruto asked. Shino held a finger in the air. I believe she has. Give her time, Naruto. Konoha wasn't built in a day. After a few seconds, a female Kikaichu flew onto his finger. If Ino knew we put an insect on her without her permission, we'd probably be buried 6 feet into the ground, Naruto stated. Maybe, but we needed a way to find her if the situation needed us to separate, explained Shino. A second later, another Kikaichu landed on Shino's finger. Naruto shivered. I'm sorry Shino, but it was extremely uncomfortable knowing one of your insects was on me without knowing where it was. I understand, but it was necessary, said Shino. I know. The two genins walked back to the village, both of them too tired to carry on a conversation. They stopped when they came to Shino's compound. See you tonight Shino, Naruto said holding out his hand. Shino nodded and shook his friend's hand. You too. Shino turned around and walked through the gates to his family's compound. Naruto turned to head to the Ichiraku's when an Anbu guard appeared in front of him. Naruto saw the long purple hair and knew it was one of the guards who treated him like a friend. As best as a guard can anyway. Yes, Neko-san, Uzumaki, your presence is required at the Hokage's office, she stated. Naruto nodded. Thank you. If you have time, can you report to Tsuki Ichiraku about my delay? The woman nodded. Of course. Arigoto, he bowed as the woman shushined away. Naruto slowly walked down the Hokage's hallway. Even from a distance, he could hear the third's loud voice along with several others. He thought best to come back later when the door opened. Homura and Kaharu were the first to step out when a third joined them. He was a tall man with scraggly black hair and tape wrapped around one of his eyes. He was clad in white robes and carried a walking stick with his good arm. The trio spotted Naruto in the hallway. Homura scowled while the Kaharu just nodded. The other man just gave Naruto a steely gaze. The boy saw the look, but also saw the hint of interest in the man's eyes as well. Good afternoon, Uzumaki. We had just gotten word from your sensei that you passed your genin examination. Congratulations. Naruto, not wanting to be rude, bowed. Thank you, Danzo. Shimura Danzo. I am an advisor to the Sandaime along with my colleagues. Naruto froze. The third told him to avoid this man at all costs. The Sandaime never fully trusted Danzo as a member of the council because of his previous dealings with an organization known as the Foundation. The third couldn't fully prove the existence of the hidden organization and had not trusted Danzo since. We'll leave you to your meeting with my old teammate. I'll be sure to keep an eye on your future, Uzumaki, said Danzo. I'm sure you will. Nevertheless, Naruto bowed and quickly walked by them to the Sandaime's office. When he opened the door, he saw the man pacing back and forth in front of his window and trying to light his pipe. Gigi, you okay? Naruto asked. The third looked up and smiled at the boy. I'm fine, Naruto. Naruto walked in and sat down in front of his desk. Gigi, you're antsy and muttering. Something's got you riled up. The third sighed and sat down. I'm guessing you met Danzo on your way up here. Naruto nodded. Yeah, charming guy, he said sarcastically. The Hokage chuckled, but then turned serious. I'm afraid he knows about your heritage as well as my colleagues. In fact, I believe he was the one who originally found out that night we discussed it with the Ichirakus. However, I am unable to prove it. So what did he want? Asked Naruto. To accept your lineage, answered the third, waiting for Naruto to scowl and say forget it. He was surprised when he saw the boy frown and look down at his feet. To be honest, Naruto had begun to have his doubts. Kohari's question kept buzzing through his mind whenever he had a moment to think. What would he have done? He was given the choice of sealing a biju into a newborn to save the sake of this village. True to his word, he would give his life instantly if it meant saving all that he loved. But to burden a child when he was given no option, was that really the right direction to go? Something wrong, Naruto? Asked the Sandaime. Naruto took a deep breath before answering. Gigi, if you were the Hokage during Kyuubi attack, would have followed the same course as the fourth and sealed the biju into me. The third's eyes widened with surprise and the pipe in his mouth fell out. Then the man's eyes saddened and he began to stare at his own feet. It was several moments before the Hokage answered. Yes. Being the Hokage means doing whatever was necessary to save the village. Naruto felt tears begin to leak from his eyes. Even another leader admitted he would have sealed the Biju into him if given the chance. Why, though? Asked Naruto. Why me? The third took a moment to relight his pipe before answering. Because the nine-tailed demon was too strong for just anyone to volunteer and become a Jinchuriki. What? Asked a now perplexed Naruto. You've read the scroll I gave you, right? Naruto nodded. Well, that sealing process was not the only way to seal a tailed beast. There are many kinds of seals out there, but that one was the most effective. Some sealings only require a seal and an object for it to be successful. You mean of Shukaku, said Naruto. He read how the Tanuki spirit was sealed into a teapot. The third nodded. But the only reason that worked because Shukaku was significantly weaker than the Kyuubi. Kyuubi was a force of nature that could not be stopped. Only a few ninja have faced him and lived. Who? Asked an eager Naruto. One was the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. The third smiled at Naruto's dropped jaw. Yes, he was one of the few. Not only did he fight the demon, he won. He won. Yes. It was a battle so great that it carved the earth. Not even the great shinobi wars had seen that much carnage. So what happened to the Kyuubi? The demon was sealed away into its first Jinchuriki. Since that time, there have been 3 Jinchurikis for the 9 tails. You are the third, Naruto. Naruto rose an eyebrow. Who were the other 2? The third stood from his seat and walked towards a painting on the other side of the room. It's one of the reasons I called you here, Naruto. He removed the painting, revealing a locked safe. The old man twisted the knob quickly and opened the door. He pulled 2 leather-bound books from the safe. What are those? Asked Naruto. The third presented them to Naruto. These are your mother's journals. Naruto's eyes widened as he read the name on the cover of the first book. Kushina Uzumaki. I'm sorry I kept these from you, Naruto, but the information in these journals is just as rare as a forbidden scroll. And when you read them, you will know why you were chosen to be the next Jinchuriki. Naruto slowly grabbed the books with trembling hands. After being alone for all of these years, he finally had a connection to his mother. When he was younger, when he was staring at kids at the playground, the only thing he wanted most to have a mother watch over him. One who would treat him with kindness when introducing him to other kids. Treat him with gentleness for ever scraped knee or elbow. Scold him for not eating his vegetables. And hug him tightly every night. He instantly became protective of them and clutched them to his chest. Then looked up with a smile at his adoptive grandfather's face. Thanks, Gigi. The third smiled and patted his shoulder. Then he sat back down in his seat. You're welcome, Naruto. Now you better get going if you're going to meet your teammates for Shikaku's barbecue tonight. Are you going? The old man sighed and waved his hand at the stack of papers in a tray labeled, process. I'm afraid not. Konohamaru as though. Naruto struggled not to smile. I understand. And you're right. The next Sannin needs to get to his teacher's house in time. The third's head snapped up with an unreadable expression on his face. What? He asked. Shikaku-sensei told his he's going to turn us into the next Sannin. Shino thought the idea was impossible, but sensei said that wasn't going to stop him. The third didn't say anything. Naruto saw him look at the desk with an expression of immeasurable sadness. Gigi, are you okay? Sarutobi snapped back to reality and put on a smile Naruto knew was false. I'm great, Naruto. Now, you should get going to your sensei's complex if you want to beat the Akamichis to the food. Hurry along now, he said while waving a dismissive hand. Naruto knew when a meeting was over when he saw that hand and got up to leave. But he had never heard the third sound like that when he was talking. It was almost like he was struggling to keep his emotions in check. As Naruto closed the door, he thought he heard the lightest sound of single drop of water hitting the desk with his sensitive hearing. As Naruto, Tsuki and Ayame entered into the Nara clan's compound, the smell of smoke and meat was already heavy in the air. The Nara's front yard was nearly 10 acres with several scattered trees providing shade. The building was a traditional two-story home nearly 100 meters long. But the real deal was the behind the compound, where the Nara's deer roamed in forests. The Naras didn't have the biggest clan building, but they did have the biggest selection of land. Their compound stretched nearly halfway to the land of wind. "Hey, Naruto!" yelled Choji from underneath a tree. He, Shikamaru, Hinata, Ino, Shino, and Konohamaru were eating in a group with a plate in their laps. Naruto waved back and went to go place the pot of miso ramen he brought to the party onto the table with the other food before fixing himself a plate and joining his friends. Ayame placed the dessert she brought and joined him. From the corner of his eye, he saw that Shikaku, Choza, Inoichi, Shibi, Kurenai, the third son and Konohamaru's uncle, Asuma, Sum and Ebisu standing next to a giant grill filled with every single meat you can have at a barbecue. Another group, featuring everyone's wife or mom, was at a table next to the food. Jihara, Choji's mom, Anaka, Ino's mom, Yoshino, Shikamaru's mom, Hana, Kiba's sister, Kurai, Shino's mom, and Rana, Konohamaru's mom. "Go to your friends, Naru-kun," Ayame told Naruto. "I need to get involved with some gossip with my fellow girls." Naruto suppressed a shudder and grinned. "Okay, Aya-chan." Shino and Hinata made room for him as he sat down with his friends. "Glad you could join us," Kiba grinned. He had a plate in his lap while Akamaru ate from a small bowl on the ground beside him. "I'm glad I could be here. We better enjoy this day while we can," said Naruto. Then he looked around, confused. "Where are your teammates, Kiba?" The Ninken user rolled his eyes. Sasuke's probably wondering if it's worth damaging his pride by mingling with the commoners while Sakura is patiently waiting for him to get out of the house. Everyone had a chuckle at this, while Shino just grinned. Surprisingly, he was the next one to speak. "We were just discussing our genin tests." "So each jonin gave a different test?" asked Naruto. "With the same objective," answered Shikamaru. "Our sensei gave us 3 tests, each one with a different objective. At first, she put us into a genjutsu to separate us and then fought us one-on-one. My test was to capture her while the two of us was surrounded in mist." Choji swallowed his food before speaking. "My test was to simply to find her, but she somehow led me to a dark, secluded part of the training ground where I couldn't see more than a foot in front of my face. What was worse, the ground was extremely rocky so I couldn't use my human boulder technique. Also, there too many trees in area as well so my expansion technique would have only caused a bigger mess." Hinata took a breath before giving her version. "My test was to simply to incapacitate her with brute force. She told to come at her with the intent to kill." Naruto felt a rush of sympathy for Hinata, who knew she had trouble attack others. It may have been a little barbaric of Kurenai to force Hinata into that situation, but Naruto knew it was a necessary tactic for breaking Hinata out of her shell. "I spent nearly 30 seconds looking for her when I realized that I needed Hinata to help me see through this mist and find Sensei," continued Shikamaru. "When I tried to escape and look for her, I realized I was in a genjutsu. I dispelled it and immediately found Hinata and Choji beside me with their eyes glazed over. Meanwhile, I was blindly searching for Sensei when all of a sudden, I feel this rush of chakra and Shikamaru is standing in front of me. He explained what happened and I was kicking myself while he woke up Hinata," added Choji. "During my genjutsu, I couldn't strike back," Hinata admitted. "Kurenai Sensei was attacking me mercilessly. I was about to give up when everything around me faded and Shikamaru and Choji were standing in front of me." Hinata then bowed her head with a few tears leaking from her eyes. Naruto was about to comfort her when Choji grabbed her hand and patted it. Hinata looked up and smiled gratefully at Choji who smiled back. Naruto turned to Shikamaru with a raised eyebrow. The boy just smirked back. "After we woke up Hinata, she was able to use her Byakugan and find Kurenai Sensei for us. She was in a clearing on the other side of the training field we were using, Shikamaru continued. Choji was able to engage into battle easily while Hinata watched from the shadows, waiting to disengage any genjutsu Kurenai-sensei threw at Choji. Hinata rose her head just enough to see everyone beaming at her. She immediately turned red and focused on her feet again. Everyone laughed. Yeah, Hinata was a real trooper. All right, smiled Choji. I could barely feel the genjutsus she put on me. But Hinata told me later Sensei tried nearly 7 times to trap me with illusions, but she was there to stop them. In the end, we were able to capture Kurenai-sensei with my shadow possession technique, finished Shikamaru. Wow, you guys are really amazing, gushed Konohamaru. Maybe, but if it wasn't for Hinata, we wouldn't have been able to pass, smiled Choji. Amen, agreed Shikamaru. Meanwhile, Hinata just blushed brighter. But she had a Cheshire grin on her face as well. Naruto turned to Kiba. What about your test? Kiba answered by rolling his eyes. Well, you let yourself get captured? Asked a bewildered Choza. Shikaku nodded and took a swig of sake. Shino and Ino were on the borderline of using all of their chakra, but they were still willing to keep fighting. If I prolonged the fight anymore, I would have most likely have a couple of chakra-exhausted students. Luckily, Naruto's newest technique was a perfect excuse to get captured. This caused everyone else to chuckle. Who knew the kid could actually do something with ramen dough? He's got to be a creative genius, admitted Sume. How does he do it? Kurenai asked Yuki, who joined them at the grill. I'm not sure, the ramen cook admitted. He just told me he needs the dough with his chakra and goes with that. It can't be too difficult if Konohamaru can do it. It is, said Shikaku. I've tried and all I get is a mess that Yoshino yells at me for making. Troublesome. So what's the secret? Asked Kurenai. The answer is logical, spoke Shibi, who surprised everybody by actually speaking. We all know what village his ancestors dwelled in. With the chakra the village hidden in whirlpools mastered, is it really impossible for Naruto to create something like this? There was a moment of silence before everyone smiled. No, it's not impossible, grinned Shikaku. Then Sume scared everyone by bursting out laughing like a maniac, causing everyone to stare at her. What's so funny? Asked Inoichi. I just realized who would have loved Naruto creating a ramen jutsu, Sume struggled to say. Who? Asked Asuma. Everyone waited for Sume to quit laughing when Shikaku started laughing as well. When he realized everyone was staring at him with confusion, he took a deep breath. Come on, you know. A certain red habanero we all know. With that, everyone realized who and started laughing as well. Kakashi-sensei tied Sakura to a stump. Laughed Ino. Kiba nodded. She was the one that failed the most at our exercise when she fell for a genjutsu sensei put on her. He then lectured us on the importance of teamwork, saying that supporting your comrades was more important than following the shinobi rules. He also said that if he had to pass anyone, it would be me and Akamaru. Because you two work as a team already, Naruto filled in. Yeah, anyway, Sensei told us he would give us another chance to pass. But he told me and Sasuke not to give any of our lunch to Sakura, who said it was her punishment for being easily influenced by a simple illusion. What a jerk, said Choji. Actually, everyone noticed he was kind of teary. So me and Sasuke are eating while listening to Sakura's stomach growl nonstop. I heard her mumble that she was stupid for not eating dinner last night. Last night? Why the hell didn't she eat dinner? Asked Naruto. Diet, Ino said miserably. Naruto looked at her, noticing she had 2 empty plates at her feet. He felt himself swell with pride when Ino begun to take her metabolism seriously and eat more. Well, I wasn't about to let her starve so I gave her my plate, continued Kiba. She looked at me like I was crazy and said we'll get in trouble for disobeying sensei's orders. I told her to just shut up and eat because I wasn't about to let my teammates starve. Wow, so you put Sakura in her place, huh? More or less. Then, Sasuke handed her his plate and said she would need her strength to continue on. I cut her ropes so she could eat on her own when Kakashi appeared before us. What'd he do? Gasped Ino. Ah, man. There were storm clouds around him, his eyes were white with rage and his voice had become demonic. He demanded to know what Sasuke and I were doing disobeying his orders. We told him we were not about to let a teammate suffer just because he said so. Then Sensei smiled and said we passed. What? Exclaimed everybody. Yeah, I know, Kiba laughed. Anyway, he lectured us again on the importance of teamwork and to always look out for one another. Then we left. There were a few moments of silence before Naruto broke it. Is it just me, or are we going to be kept on our toes for the rest of our genin years? It's just you, said a male voice behind him. Everyone looked to see Sasuke and Sakura joining them. Hey, forehead, took you long enough to get here, said Ino. Shut up, pig, scowled Sakura. Yo, said Kakashi as he joined his fellow adults. Took you long enough, Kakashi. What happened this time? Asked Kurenai. Kakashi grinned sheepishly. You see, this new guy in the village needed directions to the Hokage Tower and I. Stop it, said everyone at once, causing Kakashi to sweat drop. I'm actually shocked that you finally passed a team, Sum said. Well, they're a little rough but I believe they can shape up to be compatible shinobi when I'm through with them, explained Kakashi. Really? Asked Asuma. Kakashi didn't answer, but instead opened his usual, make-out book of the week and started reading. What about your team, Kurenai? Asked Asuma while throwing glares at Kakashi. I'm looking forward to teaching them, smiled Kurenai. Sure, Shikamaru's lazy, Choji eats all the time, and Hinata needs help with her confidence, but that's exactly why I choose them. Shikamaru has already proven himself a capable leader and immediately watches out for comrades. Choji has established himself as the attack force of the team and can take on his opponents without fear as long as he's got his teammates beside him. That's my boy, smirked Choza. Hinata, well, she needs the most work, but I can already tell she cares about her teammates without question. She's proven herself a valuable member of her team and that's lifted her confidence up. Give them enough time and I'll mold them into something special. Everyone nodded and then turned to Shikaku. When he saw their stares, he sighed. Well, let me guess, interrupted Sum. It's troublesome, right? Actually, I'm really looking forward to it. He saw the disbelief and scoffs on his friends' faces. I'm serious. The techniques and teamwork I saw today, it was unbelievable. Ino rose incredibly in her abilities after being given a pep talk from Naruto and Shino and worked extremely well together. Shino was able to organize many of the attacks on me and kept me on my toes a lot better than many Chunin I've faced. And Naruto? Asked Chuki. Shikaku smiled. I don't think any of what Ino and Shino could have been done if it wasn't for Naruto. His unpredictability and spirit kept the team going and made my jaw drop a couple of times. He's already got a grasp of his chakra control along with a good head to becoming team leader. That boy has already changed my daughter, Inoichi smiled. First thing she tells me after she passed today is she wants to learn more of the clan's jutsus. Oh, she asked this with several plates of food around her as well. When I asked her about her diet, she scowled and said nothing. Naruto has made a tremendous impact on my son as well, said Shibi. He's a lot more open with talking about his day and also wants to learn more about his clan's techniques as well. More importantly, he smiles when he mentions his friends. It seems Naruto has been helping everyone out, smiled Choza. Choji spends every day at Ichiraku's with Shikamaru, Naruto and Hinata. Then training with them later in the day when they were at the academy. Dad doesn't stop talking about him either, grinned Asuma. He says he's been a good influence on Konohamaru. My son said it's troublesome, but he enjoys spending more time with his friends than watching clouds. It looks like Kiba's enjoying his time with the group as well, said Sum as he watched his son laugh the kids. It seems like you raised him up pretty well, Kakashi said towards Tuki. Yeah, smiled Tuki. He's had a big impact on Ayame and I, ever since he walked into the shop all those years ago. Later in the evening, everyone had gathered along a giant bonfire in the middle of the compound. Rana had Ebisu take an exhausted Konohamaru home while Hana left to check on the animals at her clinic. Kakashi left to do whatever. Each family sat with each other on a separate log. Hinata sat with Kurenai and Asuma while Naruto sat with the Ichirakus. Sasuke left early and Sakura looked like she was going to follow, but instead sat down on the same log as Kiba and his mother. So what do we do now? Asked Shikaku. We could tell ghost stories, grinned Kiba. Naruto shivered. Maybe not. He was leaning against the log while Ayame sat on it with Naruto leaning against her legs. You're not scared of ghosts, are you, Naruto? Asked Choji. Well, no, but I don't want scare Ayame, he sheepishly lied. Are you still scared of the ramen ghost told you about when we were kids? Teased Ayame. Everyone laughed out loud while Naruto scowled at his girlfriend. A ramen ghost? Are you serious? Laughed Shikamaru. Please tell us, Ayame. I'm eager to hear this, Shino actually snickered. Okay. You see, on a night very much like this, two young genins were walking down the street, began Ayame. Everyone leaned in to hear the story while Naruto hugged his knees in fear. Yes, the story was pathetically simple and childish, but Naruto was only a kid when he first heard it. It didn't help with his friends snickering around him at his childhood fear. And even though he was older, he still felt scared the more Ayame progressed with the story. All that was left were two empty ramen bowls. Ayame ended the story dramatically. No, yelled Naruto as he huddled in the fetal position at Ayame's feet. Meanwhile, everyone else was laughing at Naruto's fear. Ah, man, how can you be scared of that? Laughed Kiba. All the adults were smiling at Naruto with sympathy and hilarity. Choji, Kiba, Shikamaru, Ino, and Sakura were laughing nonstop. Hinata had turned bright red in effort to silence her giggles. Shino's shoulders were slight shaking as laughed. Ayame giggled as she pulled Naruto up and hugged him from behind. I'm sorry, Naru-kun. See if I rescue you again, mumbled the blonde. Anybody got another story? Asked Choza. Naruto suddenly brightened and dug a hand into his pockets. How about a song? No campfire songs, Ino demanded. Naruto rolled his eyes and pulled out his ocarina. Not that. How about I play a song on this? Ayame clapped her hands together. I've always wanted to hear you play. Where did you get that? Asked Shikaku. Iruka-sensei gave it to me, said Naruto. Here's a new song I just learned. With that, he put the flute to his lips and began to play. The eerie, haunting sound of the flute began to echo through the air around the campfire. It was a song he learned from a music book he got in the library. It's about a warrior who sacrificed himself to save his comrades by using an evil power. When the evil began to take over, he asked his comrades to seal himself away so he wouldn't cause any harm. Naruto didn't know how long he played, but when he was done, he felt better than he did earlier. He opened his eyes to see everyone staring at him. The second he stopped playing, everyone heard a wolf howl in the distance. Wow, that was actually kind of chilling, admitted Sakura. The song was so freaky, but sorrowful at the same time, said Choji. Yes, it was very sad, Hinata whispered. What was the name of the song? Asked Kurenai. The Curse of Zen-Aku, said Naruto. A slight breeze wafted through the campfire, causing everyone to shiver. Naruto smiled as he felt Ayame hug him tighter. Wow, you didn't need a story to scare us. You needed a song, Kiba said. Do you know any others? Asked Yoshino. Any non-scary songs? Naruto smiled and began to play Lugia's song. It seems that Naruto wasn't the only one to succumb to the lullaby as the sleepy parents growled their sarcastic thanks to the blonde as they carried their sleeping kids back homes. Naruto thought he got his revenge for laughing at them earlier when Tsuki yawned and asked him to carry Ayame home. Carrying her piggyback, Naruto was eager to get back home and begin reading his mother's journals. He told Tsuki all about it as they made their way back. So you see, The reason the fourth sealed me away is in the journals, he explained. Wow. That's very interesting, said Tuki. Naruto was silent for a few moments before asking the same question he asked earlier. Hey, Pops, if you were the Hokage during the attack, would have you sealed the fox spirit into Ayame? Tuki turned to Naruto with a tense look. That's a very strong and personal question to ask, Naruto. I know and I'm sorry for asking, Naruto apologized. But it's just a question that has been bugging me for the past few days. Well, I'm lucky to say that I have never been given that responsibility, Tuki admitted. Then the man bowed his head and stared at his feet. But I too have thought of situations where the possibility has been present. What? Tuki took a deep breath. Ever since Ayame's mother passed away, I was always plagued with the question, what would I do to protect Ayame? It's a question every father asks himself when he starts a family. Of course, the answer is always the same. What is it? Asked Naruto. Tuki turned to Naruto with a small smile. That I would do anything, even giving my life, to protect that which I love most. Naruto chuckled. You sound like a Hokage to me. Maybe, but I couldn't handle the responsibility of so many people, Tuki grinned. Having a family that big would be too troublesome. Family. Did Gigi give you the will of fire speech too? Hiruzen told me something of the sort. Then Tuki stopped and looked at Naruto. When you become Hokage, will the village be your family as well? Of course it will, said Naruto. Then you have to consider what the fourth thought as he stared at the Nine Tails 12 years ago. Not what he would do to protect his village, but to protect his family. If by keeping the village and you alive was to seal the demon into you, would that be the correct choice? Is that worth dying for? To protect those you love? Naruto was stunned for a few moments. He had thought about giving his life to protect the village, but not the way the fourth did. Now looking back, Naruto realized the stress and fatigue the third suffered even after doing the job for nearly 30 years and having nearly 12 years of peace. Maybe sealing the Kyuubi into Naruto wasn't the correct choice, but the fourth's only choice. Yeah, said Naruto. I think I'm beginning to understand. About time, said Tuki as he ruffled up Naruto's hair. Naruto gently placed Ayame onto her bed and sat down beside her. Sorry about the early bedtime, said Naruto. Sorry. I should be thanking you, yawned Tuki. I haven't had a good night's sleep in a long time. Well, I better get. Naruto started before Ayame wrapped her arms around Naruto's waist and pulled him back down. He began to panic, thinking that Tuki would kick his ass like a father should, but was annoyed when Tuki smirked. Good night, son, he snickered as he walked out of the room. Naruto grumbled and tried to get in a comfortable position with Ayame's death grip around his middle. But he couldn't fall asleep. While being snuggled warmly against his girlfriend was something he would never pass up, he was a little bummed that he would have to wait until tomorrow to start on his mom's journals. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the object that fell out of the books earlier on. It was a picture of his mother when she entered the academy at the age of 8. The picture was faded, but still had color. She was wearing a formal kimono for ceremonial events. She had a round face with violet eyes and bright red hair. When he first saw her face, he thought he was looking at a mirror when he realized they had the same eye and facial structure. He smiled when he saw the frown on her face and he could probably understand why. Her hair was done in a way was shaped like a tomato. He would probably be frowning too. Naruto stared at the picture for a few minutes before placing it back into his pocket. So, what are we doing here? Asked Naruto. He and Shino were waiting underneath the same as yesterday at the training grounds. They arrived on time and were waiting on Shikaku. I don't know, although I know why gave us the day off, grumbled Shino. You're sore, aren't you? Grinned Naruto. Of course. I thought the academy trained us within the limits of genin stamina. Yesterday was insane. Well, like you said, better get used to it. Naruto then looked around for his other teammate. Where's Ino? Shino shrugged. A few minutes later, a new sound came announced Ino's presence. Ow. Ow, 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 ow. Ino came into view, walking stiffly towards them. Each of her steps was gradually taken with ease. Hey, Ino, want to train a little? Naruto yelled. Shut the F%K up. She yelled back, causing Naruto to flinch. I'm sorry. No, no, I shouldn't have snapped, Ino muttered. I've just never been this sore before. Is that not a good thing? It means you have begun to take this seriously, explained Shino. Ino stared at him for a moment before smiling. Yeah, it is. A moment later, a puff of smoke enveloped them and Shikaku was standing there with a leather bag to his belt. Good morning, Team 10. Good morning, Sensei, they chorused. Now, I know you're tired and sore, he chuckled. Ino scowled. So we'll make this quick. I want to do two things. First, he pulled 3 pieces of paper from his pocket and handed one to each of his students. What are these? Asked Naruto. Chakra papers. These papers were grown from the trees that use a special kind of chakra to grow. By channeling your chakra into this paper, I'll be able to tell what your elemental chakra is. Seriously? Asked Ino. Yes. Why don't you go first? Ino took the paper in her hands, closed her eyes and focused. A moment later, her paper erupted in flames, causing her to drop it in surprise. A fire element. How appropriate for a hot-tempered blonde, said Shikaku. Bite me, Sensei, Ino muttered while rubbing her burnt fingers. Your turn, Shino. Shino held his between the tips of his fingers. After Ino's demonstration, he didn't want to have the same incident. However, his paper crumbled in his hands. Lightning. Huh, I guess that means you're a lightning bug, snickered Shikaku. Shino didn't say anything as he put his paper in his pocket. But Naruto saw from his posture and eyebrows that he was annoyed with the nickname. And finally, Naruto placed the paper in his fingertips and focused his chakra. A moment later, the paper split into 2 pieces. Wind. Well, that makes sense. You're full of hot air anyway. Hey, okay. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. Damn straight, muttered Naruto. Anyway, know that you know your elements. I'll make arrangements for you to meet up with other shinobi who have the same elements during our training sessions. But they will only be able to give you the basics. Learning elemental jutsus will be up to you. Understand? Yes, Sensei, Team 10 chorused. Now for the final part of our meeting. Shikaku reached into the bag and pulled out a camera. Team photo time. A moment later, Team 10 face faulted. You brought us here for a picture? Asked Naruto. I don't even have my hair done, complained Ino. Well, too bad. This is my wife's camera and this was the only time I could sneak it away from the house. I need to get it back before noon so she won't notice I took it. Shikaku placed the camera on a stump and adjusted the settings. Meanwhile, Ino was desperately trying to fix her hair. Don't worry, Ino. Your hair looks nice, said Shino. Ino froze for a moment before smiling gently. Thank you, Shino. Naruto grinned as noticed Shino turn the slightest pink. Okay, now we got 10 seconds. Interrupted Shikaku. He pushed the kids forward and in front of the camera. Pick a cool pose and say cheese. Naruto stood on the left. He gave an eye-closed smile while giving 2 peace sign hands. Shino stood on the right. His glasses and high collar didn't exactly give him an expression. Ino stood in the middle. She gave a peace sign while giving the camera a wink. Shikaku stood behind them. His arms were crossed with a grin on his face. Cheese.